Hi, this is Jed Shields of Performance Management Innovation. Just going to take you through some of the basic Excel functions that I use within the dashboards in order to interrogate a chunk of data to get some information out of it. So we can see in this corner here we've got a set of data. So we've got a number of products, cable 1, 2 and 3. We've got the quantities that were produced on a particular date. And I've also tagged each of these dates with a week number and a month. So in this case 2010 week 22, and that's within May, so 2010 May. So here are the actual functions that I use regularly. So we've got sum, count, COUNTA, SUMIF. I'll take you through some product in the next video, as that's a little more complex, but it's a very good function, very powerful way of getting out certain bits of data from a large list. So we go back to these basic ones first. I'm going to show you a fixed range first of all. So if you have a look at the sum formula here, what we're doing is we're summing everything within B2 to B10 as we've defined, and that's within this blue rectangle. So very basically just adds all of these up and gives you the sum. So in this case it's telling us that the total quantity within there is 90. So of all these products and all these dates, the total is 90 products were actually completed. Count simply counts the numbers that are within a particular range of cells. So again, within this blue rectangle, it's counting up the number of occurrences where the cells have numbers. Now that's slightly different to a COUNTA, which is this one here. Almost identical, but it counts the number of cells that aren't blanks. So it also counts text as well as numbers, whereas a count wouldn't count anything that had text within it. SUMIF is a way of summing a particular set of data according to a set of criteria that you've asked it to. So in this example, I'm telling it to look for cable 1 within A2 to A10, and then anything where there's a cable 1, I want you to sum the quantity that's in B2 to B10. So that's a way of defining a range of what it's summing. So as we can see in this example, it's come up with 15, so it's obviously adding cable 1, which is a 5, a 6 and a 4, and ignoring everything else. Now the problem with fixed range is obviously if you add any more data to the bottom of the list, or you've got a query set up that automatically imports data at certain periods of time, then this fixed range formula simply won't pick it up. It'll just look at its area that you've defined and it will ignore everything else. So it's going to get out of date very quickly unless you manually change those formulas to take into account of the however many lines of new data you've added in, which is obviously not something you want to do. So one way of getting around this is to use a larger range. Now the example I've used here is simply using the entire column to look at rather than fixing it between B2 and B10. I've told it to look at anything within column B, and that works fine for certain functions. However, it does have problems where you might have a set of data underneath another set of data, for example, that you want kept separate. Now that isn't good working practice anyway, but if you did have that, then what you'd find is your sum would take into account the second set of data as well as the first, which you want to keep separate. It also has a small issue with COUNTA. Now I did mention that COUNTA includes numbers and texts. So in this particular example we're looking at anything in B. Now you can see that B has also got a bit of text in the heading, and it's obviously counted that as well as all the numbers, so it's given you a value of 10. Very simple way of countering that is to add a -1 at the top, but obviously that's not ideal either. but it gives you the correct result. Now a better way of doing this is to create defined names. Now I've created some names already. Here's a list of the names I've created so far. So I've created product, quantity, date, week number, month, which you will find are the headings along the data set. And also data set I've defined as the total set of data that we're looking at. So if we have a look at the name manager, I'll pick up product as an example. Now I've added a formula at the bottom here. Now what this formula does by using a COUNTA function is looks at the area, finds out how much data is actually within the worksheet and the area that I'm looking at, which in this case starts at A2 as your top point of reference, and then works down until it finds the last set of data. So this function actually makes the named range dynamic, so if we do add more data, then the named range increases in size. Also, obviously, if we do take data away, then the named range reduces in size as well. Now the other advantage of a named range is that it's more user friendly when you're error checking formulas and things, for example. So if we can see in this formula we're looking at B2 to B10. Well, it's not immediately apparent what B2 to B10 is until you look at the column heading, and you can see, well, I'm obviously looking at a set of data within a quantity range. A named range, we can actually name that particular range as quantity, so it's more meaningful straight away. So if we put in a formula for sum and we look at quantity, then we can see that it's exactly the same result as the fixed range and the larger range, but the formula is easier to read. It tells you exactly what you're looking at. Also do exactly the same for count, quantity, and exactly the same for COUNTA. So again we'll do quantity. Now I did mention before that the COUNTA previously included the title, but now within the defined named range we're not looking at the headings, we're actually starting off at this point here, so that never comes into it. SUMIF again is easy to read, so SUMIF, so we're looking at product, where the product is cable 1, and then we want to return the quantity, and there we go. So it's a much easier formula to read. You can immediately see that within the SUMIF you're looking for cable 1 within product and returning the quantities. Very, very simple, and it's a little easier to read than this particular formula here. I'm going to increase the set of data that we're looking at now just to prove the point with the fixed range. So if we go to data 2, I've got a set of data here that's ready to go, so copy that. If I simply paste that over, what we now see is that the fixed range has stayed where it was because we told it just to count any data within that area that was already specified. But you'll notice that the larger and the named ranges have both increased with the data set increase. So it's a lot more dynamic. Every time that your data increases, it automatically changes, whereas with a fixed range you have to manually go in and change it. So it's a lot more user friendly, a lot less prone to error because you're not manipulating the formulas every time, and it's just easier to use an error trap. Okay, I'll finish the demo here. If you take a look at my next video, I'll talk about some products which are a little bit more complex and ways in which we can make defining what we want to look at within the data set a little easier as well using drop-down lists.